that. Cool.
I have to borrow some equipment to make it all
That's great.
look. So I moved this.
Thank you for my lunch. No. Oh, you got the value meal? Okay, good. Now John, you will be getting an email from Kevin shortly as to what this is pertaining to. Yeah, I know. This is
Call the meeting for April 23rd, 2018, the City Council of Pacifica. I'll call that to order. And could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Martin?
Here.
Councilmember O'Neill?
here.
Councilmember Degree. Mayor Pro Tem Butterlos.
Here.
Mayor Keener.
Here. And we'll have the salute to the flag led by Mike O'Neill.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have a closed session report?
No reportable action?
Okay, thank you. Okay, the first thing on the agenda is a special presentation on Get Us Moving, and this, it's listed in the agenda as Jessica Epstein. She can't be with us. In fact, it will be Corey Wolbach and Zoe Kirsten Tucker.
Good evening, Mayor Keener, members
Good
of the
evening.
council. Happy to be here to talk to you this evening about the next phase of the Get Us Moving San Mateo County outreach effort. As you'll see in this presentation this evening, we've had an incredible outpouring of response to our survey. It's been an amazing experience, really, to hear from residents all over the county about their priorities for transportation as we move forward. Though there are some commonalities, we've really come to appreciate how areas differ in their priorities for transportation. So we're now going through the challenging job of narrowing our focus and finding just the right balance between the different needs around the county. So with that, I'd like to introduce Corey Wolbach, who's here to talk about both the results of the Phase 1 survey and also the Phase 2, if I might add, really exciting Phase 2 effort that we're engaging in now. So, Corey?
Thank you, Zoe. Good evening. So, as Zoe suggested, we'll first talk a little bit about what we did in Phase 1 of Get Us Moving, with a little bit of a reminder about what the whole effort has been, talk about where we're going with Phase 2, and how you can help. Of course, Get Us Moving San Mateo County is a joint partnership, as you know, between San Mateo County Transit District and the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, and we've worked really closely with every city in the county, including your staff. Viano Campo and Kevin Woodhouse have both been very helpful. Of course, the concept here is that in order to fund the dire transportation needs of all kinds throughout the county, some additional funding will be necessary, even just to maintain current state of good repair and current services, let alone keep up with growing needs and growing population, especially growing elderly population. As you know, there is now an opportunity due to legislation passed by Kevin Mullen and Jerry Hill that allows for San Mateo County to explore a half-cent sales tax measure. There's not been a decision made about whether to move forward with that yet. That would likely happen in June or July of this year, and then could be on the November ballot. That would have to be approved by the SamTrans Board and the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, and then would still need that 2/3 vote of the public in the county in order for it to be successful. Before doing that, as you know, we want to make sure that we've heard from the community so that the expenditure plan that would go with that would really reflect the needs. And that, again, is the background. And so Get Us Moving is really about putting together an expenditure plan based on community input. During Phase 1, we mailed out 140,000 surveys. We distributed another 10,000 to public places and to meetings around the county. We had over 100 participants at 4 town halls, including one that was great. It was right here in Pacifica. We did 50 presentations around the county and held regular meetings of our stakeholder advisory group, which includes members of various stakeholders like the business community, chambers of commerce, nonprofits, advocates for seniors, bicyclists, the environment, et cetera, and our technical advisory group, where Viano Campo from your staff and others from every city in the county participated. We also did some TV and social media advertising just to get the word out and direct people to our survey. And we actually had over 14,000 people take our survey. For anyone who works in this field of trying to get people to take surveys, that's actually remarkably high participation. I think that expresses and demonstrates the real pent-up interest that people have when it comes to traffic, pothole repairs, and need for better transportation service in San Mateo County. In our survey, we had, your 12 priorities that we suggested, and we asked people to list their top 5 in order, but we also had a fill in the blank section, or people could email when it was online. And we actually had to hire extra temps just to type in all of the comments that we received. This is just a fun word cloud that shows what words popped up the most. But really what we've also done is, we're compiling all of those comments to share with our stakeholder and technical advisory groups so they can actually look at the original comments. As I mentioned, as you know, in that first round survey, when we asked people what their top priorities were of the ones that we suggested, just to get them started, this lists what the top priority was for each respondent, and you see the beginning of a trend that you'll see through all of our forms of input, whether it was the surveys, polling, et cetera. Everywhere we looked, we got the same answer, which was the top concerns in the county are traffic on the highways, congestion on local roads, need for pothole and street repairs, as well as the desire for greater transit. And here, actually, transit is broken out into several categories, but if you combine them, there's a great need and desire that the community expressed for transit. This slide shows if you give a weighted score to each of their 5 priorities. So if somebody said something was their top priority, we gave it 5 points. If they said it was their 5th priority, we only gave it 1 point. You can fill in the middle. Again, same themes: traffic on the highways, traffic locally, pothole and street repairs, and need for better transit. We did get response from all over the county. This just breaks it down by region and by city. So we did have over 500 responses just from here in Pacifica. In addition to the poll, which is not a scientific poll because it is an optional poll, we also did scientific polling. It was done, there's a round of polling that was done last year, and that was followed up by polling again this year, testing the same question. We did a split sample to test 2 different versions. One was if the half-cent sales tax for transportation funding would be for 30 years or if it would be ongoing, and the response was really clear that there's a strong preference for it to be only a 30-year measure, not an ongoing measure, and so that's what's moving forward in continuing to craft the expenditure plan. And so looking at the polling results, we actually saw the interest go up over the last year. Now, before priming people with positive or negative messages, we just asked people how they feel about a half-cent sales tax to reduce traffic congestion, repair potholes, et cetera, that would require independent citizen oversight to provide 80 million annual dollars that the state could not take away, would have to be used for transportation right here in San Mateo County. Support was at 74%. So that's well over the threshold necessary, the 2/3 threshold for passage. It shows a great desire in the community. We also did a round of polling where we primed people with positive messages to see how they would respond to adding some positive messages, such as every penny of the measure will benefit local transportation projects and programs and cannot be taken by the state, and reminding people that the measure could be used to attract millions of dollars in state, federal, and private matching funds. And when we primed respondents to the poll with positive comments, support went up to 78%. The really interesting thing is that we didn't want to stack the deck in our favor, because we want to, before recommending anything to the Samtrans board and Board of Soups, we want to make sure that they know what the response would be like in a real world situation. And so when faced with negative comments, when we talked about what are the negative things people usually say about sales taxes, or they might say about this one, is there still support? And yes, there was. Still 72% of poll respondents, even when we primed them with negative comments, they still said 72% we'd still be in favor of moving forward. And so the features that we identified in the poll actually were reflected very closely in what we heard from respondents. Again, those same themes: traffic, pothole repairs and better transit service. As I mentioned, we did do 4 town halls in Phase 1, and we are planning 4 more for Phase 2. The one here in Pacifica at the Senior Center was really great. We had good turnout, had a lot of participation, had people come from as far away as Half Moon Bay or Brisbane just to come and talk about transit needs. And we did hear a little bit of variation from one region to another. In the town hall that we held in San Mateo, the city of San Mateo, there was just you could think about these as being kind of like focus groups. In San Mateo, the focus was more on going big, not worrying about potholes, just worry about the big changes. On the coast, we heard, here in Pacifica, we heard more focus on bus service, more focus on street repairs, and the need to make sure those are included as categories in any expenditure plan. I mentioned before our stakeholder and technical advisory groups. They helped us figure out what the priorities would be, what how we should evaluate projects. They also helped us identify potential. They also helped us identify potential projects so we could get a sense of what the need is according to cities. And that brings us to Phase 2. So Phase 2, instead of just asking people, what are your top priorities, we're asking people to make some hard choices and trade-offs. We're saying, here are some ways that the money could be divided up. If you have $80 million per year or $2.4 billion over 30 years, where should we spend that money? Not just asking what's important to you, but how would you pick? Would you spend more in one category or more in another? And so we're launching a new survey that allows you to do that, and that's at the same website, getusmovingsmc.com. Here you can see the options that we've laid out there. This is not a final expenditure plan. These aren't even the final categories. This is draft. This is just to help us move the conversation forward, and we came up with these categories based on the feedback we heard in Phase 1. And so people can identify whether they want to have low investment, a middle amount of investment, or a lot of investment in each of these categories. Repairing potholes and reducing local congestion are grouped together at this point. That's done with a real focus on the local community. But again, these are not final categories. As I mentioned, we will have 4 more town halls. The first one will be actually on May 2nd, so that's coming right up. That'll be at, actually, we just moved it. I apologize for the error on the slide. It'll be at 6:30 p.m. At Dolger Senior Center in Daly City. Then we'll have one in Burlingame on May 17th, on the 24th in Half Moon Bay, and also in Fair Oaks in the southern part of the county right next to Redwood City, and that'll be on May 31st. So just like with Phase 1, where we got great response, including great response from people in Pacifica, we're really hoping you can help us get the word out about the new version of the survey. And so here's where you can get in touch with us, and here's where you can find us, and please do help people get online to take that survey. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, Sue.
I do have a question. So regarding the coast side, so this one will be in Half Moon Bay, and it's at 6:30 at night. I forget what day of the week it is, but anyway.
It's a Thursday.
So for people getting there, other than driving, what opportunities are going to be available at that time and that day?
I don't have off the top of my head which buses will run there, but it's at 6:30, and I can give you that address.
I do think that needs to be looked at if you really want to have a good, robust understanding of the coast side. It's a traffic hour for one thing, and also there are people that need the bus, and if the bus isn't servicing them, I think even at the meeting we had here in Pacifica, people had to leave the meeting early because it was the last bus. So if there's something that the bus service could do to be much improved, at least to get the input from people on that. My other question was, I think you did say, and I'm not an online person, I tend to try to go online and get totally lost, Did you say that when you have a survey, that people can actually write in comments that have nothing to do with that is possible? I know it is on the written one. Okay.
Yeah, and actually for this survey, because it's more complex to balance one category versus another, we're really focusing it online, and there is a comment section right there. So if you don't like the categories we've offered, right, again, it's just a draft to get the conversation started. There is a fill in the blank section right there. You can write any other additional comments, feedback, suggestions.
All right, thank you.
Of course.
Deirdre Martin.
Corey, thanks for the presentation. I'm glad that you heard Pacifica and mentioned, what the main concerns were at the community meeting that we had here, our local transit and public transit and roads. So can you go back to that percentages slide, please? So this is just for a point of comparison. This really kind of means nothing yet, right?
Yeah, these are just reflecting what we think are the needs based on what we heard in phase one. These are just proposals, right? And just to kind of get that conversation started about what percentage of the total pie should be dedicated to each category. Again, the categories are not final, and how much would be allocated to each category is also not final. This is just to get people thinking about it and get more feedback.
And I think from this slide, you obviously know which ones are going to be most important to the people in Pacifica. So I think that's going to be your hard sell. I'm sure you know that. I just wanted to let you know that we know it too.
Very good.
Thanks.
And be sure to let your friends and neighbors know to keep letting us know.
And take the survey, yeah.
Exactly, that's how they can let us know.
Thank
got
you.
it.
Another question?
Sue Degree.
Along that way, I know we were at the Progress Seminar. I don't know if we were at the same transportation events, but along with the fact that Pacifica and the other coast cities are on outliers, so too is Brisbane and Foster City, and also all the people on the hills, especially seniors and people that don't drive. So along with that same question as to how to make sure that there's bus service available those evenings, can you make sure that those folks who are in the outlying areas, off El Camino, off 101, have ample opportunity to be reached, if not by some bus service at the time of the meeting, maybe a special outreach? Because for one thing, that makes Pacifica and Half Moon Bay and Pescadero not look so strange, because we have hill country, so does Millbrae, Burlingame, all the rest.
Heard the message?
Obviously, I have a fear of turning out looking like, well, there's not much back talk there.
Well, I'll definitely take that back. And again, if you have any suggestions that you want to reach out to us and let us know about ideas about how we can do a better job reaching out to Pacifica in particular, you can either through your staff or directly, you know how to reach us and let us know.
All right, thanks.
Of course.
Okay, thank you very much, Corey.
Thank you.
Next is the consent calendar, and we'll have to pull number 7 for a comment from the public, and we'll pull number 6 for comments from me, and number 5, I just have a very brief comment. I just want to read the list of projects funded by the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we can approve that, if that's okay with everybody else. And they are, there are 4 projects for this next fiscal year. One is the Lindemar pavement rehab project from Adobe to Alicante, and also Oceana Boulevard from Milagro to Monterey. 2 is the Cabrillo School pedestrian crossing improvement project, and so that will install vegetated curb extension and so on. And 3 is the citywide curb ramp project, so installing or replacing 100 curb ramps. and 4 is the Palmetto Sidewalk Project, and this is the up at the far north end of the city. It's 1,400 feet of sidewalk, curb, and gutter along the ocean side of Palmetto, from West Line down to 100 Palmetto Avenue. So this is the SB1 money, which is what this resolution is about, is going to augment and basically serve as matching funds for most of these projects. And I just wanted to make that clear. So do I have a motion for approving items 1 through 5 of the consent calendar? Oops, yeah, a couple more lights here. Mike?
Well, I was going to ask, I wanted to make a comment about number 6, but you pulled it, so I'll just go ahead and make a motion.
Okay.
I make a motion
Hang
that
on,
we...
there's,
That's okay. That was-
okay.
I go ahead, I make a motion that we approve consent items number 1 through 5.
I'll second.
Okay, please vote. And that motion carries 5-0, so that applies to items 1 through 5. Let's tackle number 6 also. Here. And number 6 is an award of contract for the 400 Esplanade Infrastructure Preservation Project and emergency protective measures. And so actually, I was thinking to have maybe just a brief overview from staff on this. Would that be possible, Van?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Van Ocampo. I'm the Director of Public Works. So the project that you have before you tonight is the 400 block of Esplanade Infrastructure Preservation Project. This is an emergency protective measure whereby rocks are going to be placed in front of the property, the city-owned property at the 400 block of Esplanade, across the post office and Chit Chat Cafe. The intent is to preserve the existing bluff that has eroded tremendously and come up with another project later on, which is to install a seawall as a permanent fix for this location. This project is being funded through a grant from the federal government born out of a federally declared emergency, and same thing with CalOES paying for 75% of the 25%, leaving the city with just 6 point something percent.
Mike, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to thank and congratulate staff that out of a $1,908,000 project, we got grants from FEMA and Cal Office of Emergency Services, and Pacifica is only paying $119,260 for that. So I just wanted to congratulate staff on ferreting out all that money, writing the grants, and making us eligible through your ability. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Sue Degree.
I didn't ask you ahead of time, I'm sorry. How does this factor in with the Coastal Conservancy Park that the city's doing together with the Coastal Conservancy?
Actually, this helps preserve the existing bluff that allows us to proceed with the design of the proposed trail on the 400 block.
And I don't recall if we were going to sculpt a stairway or some access way down to the beach as well? That's not part of that?
That's not part of
This
the
was up
Coastal
on the top
Conservancy.
only.
It's just for a, a horizontal trail next to the curb in front of the 400 block property.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so as I understand it, in early 2017, bluff retreated 35 to 40 feet in this area. And I wish we had a slide to show. We have a picture in our packets,
Page
which you
129.
can't see. But what it shows is that this was an unprotected portion of the coast. Am I right, Van?
This particular section is.
Yeah, and it looks like, Cookie Monster took a bite out of it. It's a little cove forming where this rather recent bluff erosion took place. And so that's the first point, is that. And the second is that about the permanent seawall. And the staff report says that the permanent seawall is the Coastal Commission's stance. They're not approving any new permanent rock revetments along the coast. And so you have to pitch that as a temporary protective measure and look for funding for a more permanent seawall somewhere in the future. And
Mayor, if I
Yes.
may just add, so staff has applied for hazard mitigation grant money to pay for 75% of the permanent seawall.
Right. And that's great. And hopefully, maybe we'll be able to find the other 25% somewhere. Anyway, I think that's just about everything. The total amount is 1.9 million, and the city is on the hook for something like 100,000, something.
$119,260.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you.
Another question.
Sue.
So remind me, wasn't part of the erosion in this area due to an outfall that we've moved so that we don't have that problem again?
Yes, there used to be an outfall that takes an old, not an old, but there's an existing drainage inlet at the intersection of West Manor and Esplanade, and that used to daylight at this location. But what we have done as part of the 380 Esplanade storm drainage relocation was to hook that to the new system that's now draining in the 500 block of Esplanade. So the short answer is yes, there was one before, and it was rerouted now to the 500 block.
And so that reroute shouldn't add to erosion, right? Should have helped.
No, because at that particular location, the rock revetment is more robust, and in addition to that, we did add some more rocks right at the mouth of the outlet.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. And so I think we'll consider this with item number 7 also. And on item number 7, this is the 4 residential development allocations under the city's growth management ordinance. Tiger Jazz Big Stick.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. I'm Tiger Jazz, Twirls Big Stick of Pacifica. As for the substance of it, I don't really have much commentary. I'm in favor of more housing. I'm in favor of economic development. But while I was reading through the agenda packet, I was struck by, I wasn't immediately able to get a sense of the spatial placement. I had to scrutinize harder, which is fine. I just wanted to comment that a map would have been helpful. I know that in other agenda packets for other things, like the appeal last week, there were maps of exactly what's going on where, and something like that would have been helpful for me, digesting it a bit easier. And I figure if that's true for me, it might be true for someone else, so I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you very much.
Good point. Thank you. Okay, so I'll take a motion to approve items 6 and 7 of the consent calendar.
I move that we approve items 6 and 7, consent calendar.
Sue?
Second.
All right, please vote. And items 6 and 7 pass 5-0. All right, and now we're up to oral communications. And there's a bunch of stuff in the agenda about how to behave. I don't think it's necessary to go through it, but it basically says, do unto others as you would have done to yourself. Okay. All right, so we're ready to start on this. We have a few yellow cards here. First of all, Ron Makel, followed by Randy Wong, and he's followed by Shalene Craig.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, staff. I just want to express some appreciation for the Earth Day event. This is the first year that the Open Space Committee had a table at this event, and it was nice to see that. We shared our table with the sea level rise the planning department had there, and it was really great. And I want to really express my appreciation with the city for, obviously providing the space and the structures for the tents and everything else, and help cleaning up and set up. Really, it was an amazing day. The weather was great, and there's a lot of great turnout. And every year this event gets bigger and bigger. So I just want to thank the city and also the planning department for really setting up this table for us. They were a big part, as you know. The planning department is the Open Space Committee, Park and Advisory Committee's staff liaison. Beyond Pacifica, I also want to mention last week, I think it was the 18th, was the 100-year anniversary of the Save the Redwoods League. I don't know if some of you are familiar with that group, a nonprofit, probably the most active nonprofit redwood conservation group in California, if not the world. And they've saved hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres of redwoods. So I just want to share that with you guys and kind of, I'm sure all of you appreciate our redwoods. My favorite redwood park is San Mateo County Memorial Park, where we can actually go there and see some old growth redwoods. Other thing too is in 2010, the state legislature designated the third week of April is the California California Native Plant Week. So I thought that was pretty neat, considering the fact that California has probably the largest biodiversity of native plants in the world, or certainly in the United States, out of all of the states. So I think that's great. Now, if anybody wants to see, right, it seems like this year we have a wonderful blooming of California poppies. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to see them, but it just seems like everywhere you drive, especially if you want to see some beautiful ones, big bunches of them, go along the Switchback Trail in Rockaway. They're doing a good job in restoring that trail, and there's just enormous number of poppies there, and it's great to see California poppies along our California Coastal Trail. That's pretty neat. The last thing I want to point out, if I have time here, Earth Day, the 21st, was a 100-year anniversary of the Dipsea Trail hike by 148 women 100 years ago that hiked this trail. And as it turned out, as you can actually read the article in Saturday's Chronicle, it's really worth reading, but it says here that race was a pioneering moment for women's equality, because women were not allowed to run in running races before that. So at any rate, the trail goes from Mill Valley all the way to Stinson Beach, 7 miles, approximately 150 women hiked on that trail about 100 years ago. So anyway, I just thought I'd bring that to your attention. And thanks again for the Earth Day events.
Thank you, Ron. Up next is Randy Wong, followed by Shalene Craig, followed by Brent Shedd.
Good evening. My name is Randy Wong, and I work at Breathe California. We're a public health and environmental related nonprofit. We do a lot of things like help families with asthma, teach children about the benefits of preserving the environment, and also do a lot of tobacco prevention work. And I'm here today as part of the San Mateo County Tobacco Education Coalition, which is an a coalition of health organizations, youth-serving organizations, and some law enforcement and educational agencies. I'm here really in interest of piquing your interest in tackling issues of secondhand smoke in multi-unit housing like apartment buildings. I think we all know that in California and in the Bay Area, we've made so much progress at protecting people, especially the most vulnerable populations, from issues of secondhand smoke. And one of the issues I'd like to point out is that even though we've made so much progress in protecting people from smoke in restaurants, bars, and other places like that, that there are a lot of people who we've talked to in our coalition throughout the county who really face this real issue of smoke being inside their apartments. It could be, from, for example, if I'm smoking in my apartment, the smoke can drift very easily into other apartments. And so we're here to just really to pique your interest in considering some policy options to address issues like that, to protect people where they are at home and really can't do too much about it. So thank you very much. Hope to be a resource to you in the future if you decide to pursue any matters about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Next is Shalene Craig, followed by Brent Shedd and Jason Pressman.
Good evening, Council. My name is Shalene Craig, and I work at Youth Leadership Institute, also known as YLI. And we do a lot of work with youth throughout the county, including here in Pacifica at Oceana High School. And I'm here because I do our youth-led alcohol, tobacco, and other drug prevention programming. And Youth Leadership Institute is also part of the San Mateo County Tobacco Education Coalition, also known as TEC. So a couple of our folks are here tonight. And I'm here to represent our group of youth leaders that are also part of the coalition. And we have a group that's from throughout the county: Foster City, San Mateo, South San Francisco, and Half Moon Bay. And they've all been working really hard on our campaign to pass smoke-free multi-unit housing policy in a lot of cities in the county that don't already have it. Many cities have already passed this policy: Daly City, South San Francisco, Brisbane, San Bruno, Foster City, San Mateo, Belmont, Redwood City, and unincorporated areas. And so we hope Pacifica will soon join this growing list. I would now like to share some words from our youth who couldn't be here tonight on why this policy is really important to them. So one of our youth from Foster City, who's an 8th grader named Aditi Dewan, has noted that this is an important issue for me because I'm an athlete. Young people like me should have access to clean, fresh air. Without being able to come home to clean air, many athletes could develop asthma, eventually preventing them from doing what they love. Another one of our youth, Chiroshri Das, is a freshman at San Mateo High School. And she says, this policy is important because secondhand smoke can travel very quickly through shared vents in an apartment, and it can affect the health of all the people in the building. Secondhand smoke can cause respiratory problems, ear, nose, and throat infections, and may also cause disease in children and senior citizens. Personally, I live in an apartment building, and I would not want my health and others' health compromised because of the choices of one person. I'm lucky that the city I live in has a smoke-free multi-unit housing policy, and it's important that other cities adopt this policy so that more people are able to live with fresh, clean air and healthier lifestyle. I'd also like to share a bit from a Pacifica resident who's here in the audience today, Wayne Basker. He's been living in a building for about 8 years now, and he experienced many health issues due to secondhand smoke in his building. For years, he experienced lung congestion, throat problems, headaches, fatigue, difficulty breathing, sleeping, and getting sick more often. He also fell ill with pneumonia and missed a lot of work because of that. He was able to reach out to his landlord, who thankfully made the building smoke-free. However, people still smoke within 15 feet of the building, and the smoke still drifts in. Unfortunately, the landlord's hands are tied because this is outside of her authority, and she really needs a city ordinance to establish that safe distance. Again, thank you for your time, and I hope you'll consider this policy to prevent issues like this from continuing to happen and from getting worse for the residents in Pacifica that are experiencing health issues. So our youth leaders look forward to meeting with you to push forward this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalene. Brent Shedd, followed by Jason Pressman, followed by John Michael Hansen.
Good evening, Council. Glad you're all here. This will be a good few minutes because I know you're used to getting punched a lot by the citizens, and I just want to thank you. Thank you for the Adaptation Strategies Memorandum that came out a couple days ago, and in particular, on page 2, where you mention on goal 3, that is part of the draft local coastal land use plan update, where you state that goal 3 is to preserve existing neighborhoods and promote environmental justice and local economic vitality, and states that the adaptation plan shall protect existing homes, businesses, and infrastructure in Pacifica. And as a coastal homeowner and a huge fan of Pacifica, I want to stress how important it is that you hold to that position. And I realize that it's a draft plan right now, but as a citizen, I would like to impress upon you how important it is that that make it into the final plan, and that we hold fast to protecting the homes, businesses, and infrastructure in Pacifica. Thank you so much for all the work you do for us. That's all I have.
Thank you, Brent. Jason Pressman, John Michael Hansen, and Terry Vicelli. I don't know.
Good evening, councilors. Jason Pressman. I live at 236 Shoreview, and I wanted to address you on the coastal guidelines that are being adopted and drafted right now. I know there's a working group. As Brent just said, I also want to thank you for your steadfast support of the existing infrastructure in Pacifica. And what I'd like to bring to your attention, and I wrote a letter about this as well, I've read the entire Coastal Commission guidelines, which are also influencing the Pacifica guidelines. And the Coastal Commission guidelines are quite incongruent with the goals that are stated of protecting the coast and existing infrastructure in Pacifica. And I'm not certain that that's being accounted for in the drafting of the guidelines. And I want to make sure that the council carefully review anything that's put forward, which I'm sure you would, to make sure that is addressed. Specifically, the Coastal Commission is recommending that any infrastructure on the entire coast of California that exists today not be allowed to be repaired at all. So as an example, what you approved tonight, item 6, that seawall would not be allowed to be approved under the guidelines, if interpreted in its strictest form. So I'm hoping and encouraging the council to very seriously consider making sure that whatever we adopt, whatever we approve, take that into account, because the Coastal Commission report makes no assertions at all about how to pay for these things. So for example, the destruction of private property, the destruction of commercial property, the movement of infrastructure that would need to be taken into account if managed retreat is allowed at the extent that they're advocating, there's no budget for that. There's no true discussion of how that would be handled. So irrespective of where you come out on retreat over time, I think that the Coastal Commission guidelines are actually irresponsible for the town of Pacifica, and I want to make sure that we're factoring that in as we think about our guidelines and where we're going to build. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. John Michael Hansen, Terry Vicelli, and I don't know if I've got that anywhere close to the right name, and Tiffany Zammit.
Hello, Honorable Mayor and City Council. My name is John Michael Hansen. I'm a resident of Menlo Park. My family owns a number of properties in Pacifica on Beach Boulevard and Palmetto Avenue. And what originally drew us to Pacifica is, it has this gorgeous natural beauty. And the city has this plan to make Palmetto a more vibrant main street. And we think that's absolutely fantastic. We think this is achievable while keeping Pacifica's seaside charm. Which is why we are worried about the idea of managed retreat under the Coastal Commission developmental guidelines. We feel that it has the potential, with the physical loss of property, both personal and public, to create a massive loss financially for the citizens, both in their equitable property and what it would cost from a tax standpoint to relocate the utilities on Beach Boulevard. So we're here to ask the city to please be very careful in how you consider handling what the Coastal Commission is asking you guys to do from a developmental standpoint. We love the way that Pacifica is now, and we think that we can make it even better. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Terry Vicelli and Tiffany Zamet. And Terry, would you correct my name, my butchering your name?
No problem. Tony Uccelli. I didn't want to interrupt
Tony
you from the back
Vicelli.
when you were,
Okay.
when you were doing that. So, Council, thanks for just a couple quick minutes. I'll piggyback a little bit on the last two speakers. I think that they brought up some very valid points with regards to managed retreat and also the assets that are incorporated that with the city. I'll just take it to the one more level. At this point, the Coastal Commission is in the process of updating their residential adaptation policy, which basically is going to have some their rulings on how certain things are supposed to happen in the coastal zone. And at the same time, right now, the city of Pacifica is obviously looking to review their own coastal plan. Well, it looks like that obviously with the Coastal Commission, if they change their rules, it could have a lot of impact on what you guys eventually can do with your own coastal plan. And this adoption policy that they have in place, its comment period ends in a week. As far as I know, and I've heard from a lot of residents here, I've been on a lot of email chains, nobody was properly notified about this. The Coastal Commission, there hasn't been appropriate time for many residents, commercial business owners to comment or get their input with the Coastal Commission. And so what I wanted to do was ask the council to officially ask the Coastal Commission to extend their comment period beyond 7 days from now, since, again, their eventual rulings are going to have most likely a very big impact on what the city of Pacifica can do with your long-term coastal plan. Again, I'm not trying to tilt the final rulings, but I think that all parties involved should have an appropriate time period to properly analyze their document. I looked at it's like 100 pages. It's very technical. And again, considering right now the city itself is looking to totally overhaul its own coastal plan for the first time in, 25 years, I think that we definitely want to have as much input as possible. So I feel you guys probably have a little more pull than I do with writing an email to the Coastal Commission. So I thought it might be really good if the City Council could act on behalf of its constituents that are impacted by this and put in an official request.
Thank you, Tony. Tiffany Zamet. And if I butchered your name, correct me also.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you, Tiffany Zamet. Hi there. I've lived in Pacifica my entire life, and I'm here this evening to also speak just about the commission, the Coastal Commission, and the residential adaptation guidance document. I wasn't really too aware of it until recently, and I'm a new resident at 23 Montecito. Although I've lived in Pacifica my entire life, I'm finally a homeowner. Woo! So super excited about that and raising my family here, and proud to be a longtime resident, but just coming here to voice my concerns and just hoping that you'll hear them with respect to this adaptation guidance document that I wasn't really informed about. I'm hoping that I would be able to participate and give some more insight and input if there were an extension. So I'm asking that you consider writing the Coastal Commission and asking for an extension beyond Monday. It's I think, as Tony stated, it's a 93 or 95 page document, very in-depth and technical, and I was not able to even get too far through it. And I do know that it does address some of the managed retreat discussions that have come forward to this setting. And just hopefully we can take more time to really look at what the economic impacts would be with something like that, and just the residents that will be impacted, and the schools, our elementary schools, our middle schools, the infrastructure that's here, and just the loss of residents like myself who would be displaced. So really thinking about how we can address everybody equitably. I know that it can be easy to live in other areas and say, oh, no big deal, we'll just let them wash away. But hopefully we can consider everyone equitably. And I'm just here to request that you do that, as I have concerns as a native Pacifican and look forward to raising my family here. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Tiffany. And that is all the cards I have for oral communications. That seems to be it. Okay. Now we'll move on to council communications. And I'm going to break with tradition and start off here. I'll just make this one statement. The Coastal Commission adaptation policy is a guidance document. It's not a decree, okay? And there's a big difference. So let's move on. Deirdre Martin.
So, just because we're so close to it, Earth Day was amazing in Pacifica. If you didn't get a chance to go to the Eco Fest, I hope you got a chance to pick up or restore some of the of your natural surroundings. I worked the glamorous waste collection site, which is basically the dump. We had a really awesome visit from some local VIPs. We had some county supervisors. We had a few council members and our city manager and some public works folks. And that was really neat that they got to kind of see the other side of it. Preliminary numbers, there were over 10,000 cigarette butts picked up in 2 hours in the city of Pacifica. That's just preliminary numbers. That's just mind-blowing. Also, we counted more than 5,200 visitors to the actual Eco Fest. That's a rough estimate, but we were counting. Over 1,500 pounds of trash, over 1,200 pounds of recycle. Again, these are all just preliminary numbers. It's kind of like what we got in that day, but there's more. We had a lot of habitat restoration going on, so a lot of native plants were planted and invasive species were pulled and a lot of beautification projects. So I want to thank the community and a lot of people that came from outside the community to do the work here. I want to give a big thanks to Recology, who was one of our main sponsors and played a big role with donating our dumpsters. Also want to thank the City of Pacifica, who was a co-sponsor, and was amazing to work with, as usual, just from advertising to planning. Public Works is always awesome. It goes above and beyond every year, and our police department, as well as Parks, Beaches, and Rec. And I want to thank those folks who were able to make it, too, to come, that were there. It was a great day, beautiful weather, and the unfortunate part was that I heard that by 6 o'clock that night, because it was such a beautiful day, the beaches were kind of trashed again. So the good news is a couple of the Mothers Club folks sprung into action and were cleaning up that night and have already planned some late evening cleans for the kids. So, we're doing stuff. It's a pretty great community that we come from, and that just goes to show more greatness. I attended the Progress Seminar in Monterey 2 weekends ago, where we talked about transit, we talked about housing, and how to engage our community in positive, forward-thinking movement and working together. It was really neat to kind of just learn and bounce ideas off of each other and meet new people. I also attended the climate change meeting that was held at the Sanchez Library. Unfortunately, Supervisor Pine, I think it was a mix-up with the schedule, so he wasn't actually able to come. The Office of Sustainability did give a really good presentation, and there were a lot of people there that knew a lot about climate change. there were not a lot of people there that didn't know a lot about climate change. So next time, I'd like to try to figure out how we can market to those people who should be there. And I look forward to continuing to work with them. They presented some really neat scenarios and gave you lots of things to think about. And one of those was plastics. That's all I'll say. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Deirdre. Sue Varoas.
I have a lot. We went to the library advisory meeting and we discussed the design styles for a new library. It was more involved than that. I also attended the Meet the Librarian at Palmetto, and interesting to see the new checkout for laptops held at the library. It's a great feature among the other things they do. I attended the City and County Association of Governments, and the topics were the Wiener Senate Bill 827, which would allow housing to be built in transportation corridors up to 8 stories tall, limited parking, and no city approval. That bill was not passed through the state Senate the very next day. Also, we had a discussion on Regional Management 3, which adds to the bridge tolls, which would provide managed lanes on Highway 101. I always say that wrong. Several of us attended the Progress Seminar, which Deirdre said. I also met with a group of residents concerned about the Coastal Commission sea level rise adaptation and sent a letter to the city asking if the City Council could send a letter to Coastal Commission to allow for public meetings on the plan. I don't think that the public had enough input. As of last week, there were only 20 comments on the plan. This is it. It's not a small thing. I think there are issues with some of the cities regarding the guidelines issue, and not being really guidelines, but more of permanent things. Your comments are due on April 30th, so please, regardless, send in comments by April 30th. There are no indications in this report regarding anything that could happen with insurance, loans, property values, regarding what their adaptation plan says. So I'd like everyone to write letters. And also, we do have, coming up on Thursday from 6 to 9 at the Community Center, our local coastal plan meeting, and that will have an opportunity for public comment. I also attended the City and County Association of Governments Water Committee, where we are tentatively changing our committee from a group of 5 to a group of now between 20 and 30. Some will meet at some times and not everyone at the same time, because it would be unruly. But our goal is to collaborate with each other on water issues so that we can get better grants and work with the federal government to get our projects done. Let's see. I attended a seminar on the lack of Bay Area housing. Scott Wiener again, Sonia Traus, who's running in San Francisco, who's a part of the Yes in My Backyard movement. Quite an interesting person, very young, and wanting to add housing. Let's see. I helped a large group of volunteers serve a large group of volunteers at the community center. The people who volunteer at the community center once a year get a dinner, and that was really fun, and several of us did that. Thursday, I went to the county emergency preparedness. Only 10% of the county is signed up for the alerts, the SMC alerts. So and they think that's good. I just thought that was minuscule. If you go to smcalert.info and put your name in the list so that when there are issues with road closures, wild animals, the siren's gonna go off, that you do know about it ahead. And I would like to see way larger amount of people on that. Friday, I went to the Read Aloud at Sunset Ridge Elementary, and that's always great fun. So anybody who can do that in the future, it's really great. And I did go on a VIP tour with Lynn Adams for Earth Day. We went to various cleanup sites, and we also pulled weeds at the community center. She said She's never done that, but we all got out of the bus and pulled weeds. So we did get to see a lot of the behind the scenes and the dump where Deirdre was. So it was a much better tour than usual. Thanks.
Thank you, Sue. Mike O'Neill.
Basically, a lot of the stuff they went to, I went to. I served dinner at the senior dance. Senior dinner, I served the people. They liked me. I was in charge of sparkling cider, so everybody wanted me over there. I also attended the Progress Seminar, and what was talked about was already mentioned. I also went to National Library Week, and the Economic Development Committee had an interesting speaker. They had a speaker that manages the Ceremony Shopping Center now and also Bay Hill. And she was talking about the different kinds of economic, how do we get a mix of retail, restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. And then just to kind of bounce off Mayor Keener's remark is those are labeled guidelines, but San Clemente's local coastal plan was rejected because it did not adhere to the guidelines. So I think that's something we do have to take care of and watch in the future.
Yeah, okay.
I'm done.
Sue Degree.
All right, this last week was a quarterly meeting time for meetings that I attend as well as monthly meetings. So for those of council members who were able to fill in for me, like the Economic Development and commute.org, Office of Emergency Services, I really appreciate it. I love meetings, so I was having withdrawals by not being at meetings. So I spent my time doing extra research on sea level rise around the world and checking out the California state plan for the year 2040. And it looks to me like there's pockets of money that I like to think staff already knows, but I will be sending those in. So some various types of things that we are definitely looking for money. Regarding the outreach, so for Coastal Commission outreach, in some way, I feel maybe that we're a little bit responsible as well as a coastal city, although the Coastal Commission is was voted in by the whole state of California, and so has to be, I would say, reaching out to all residents in California, but those of us on the coast side in particular, perhaps we need to take a little bit more of a role of making sure that our residents hear about things. So since Councilwoman Vice Mayor already sent in a letter, is there something that the city within the chair and the mayor can do to encourage an extension, and at the very least that maybe ask how they do outreach? I mean, I am curious, how do they do outreach? And I think outreaching to the public is extremely important. So I don't know if you can answer that now or not.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Degree. I can comment on that. We have been kind of regularly in contact with Coastal Commission staff about some of their inadequacies in notification in advance of comment letters. We are looking at the guidelines, and I'll be checking in with Planning Director Weremeister about the timeline related to that and the comments that city staff may make regarding that document.
Okay, great. Since I wasn't able to attend all those other meetings, I don't have anything else.
Okay, Sue Vardalos again.
The County of San Mateo is also doing an emergency preparedness fair. That's Monday, April 30th, from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's at Skyline College, 3300 Skyline Drive. It's parking lot K in San Bruno. And it's being put on by the county, so it will help people to learn more about emergency preparedness. There are big issues behind that.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, so first of all, regarding the location of the 535 San Pedro Avenue, that it was, let's see, which item was that? It was item 6. 7. We issued 4 residential development allocations to them. It's located in between the two parking lots near the Devil's Slide Tap Room at that south end of the San Pedro Shopping Center. So I hope that helps, but I agree that, it would be easy to include a map, and in the future, I think we'll certainly try to do that. I also attended the EcoFest. I didn't have anything nearly as glamorous to do as Deirdre did. But the next thing was pretty glamorous, and so I left the EcoFest around 12:30 and walked back to Puerto 27, where there was a 40th anniversary dinner. It was the 40th anniversary of Dolores Rosales founding the Montessori School of Lindemar up on Higgins Way. And there were about 130 people there, and it was just really a grand occasion. It was really nice. So congratulations to them, and of course read a proclamation to them, and they thought that was wonderful. So that's great. Anyway, that's everything from me, and time now for staff communications.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Keener, council members. Kevin Woodhouse, city manager. A few items that were already mentioned. I also was able to attend the EcoFest, my first one here in Pacifica. It was fabulous, great weather. I was on the VIP bus tour, and I commented to several folks that really the VIP bus tour is about driving around and actually seeing the VIPs, who are the people that are doing the work. And we saw some incredible collections of students, from the north end to the south end doing that work, as well as adults. So that was great to see. A couple meetings have been mentioned that I'll reiterate. Tomorrow night is the narrative budget study session here in this chamber at 6 p.m., and as well as the council consideration for adopting goals for the next fiscal year. So it's a special meeting on a Tuesday night. Thought I'd mention that for the record. Additionally, it was mentioned that Thursday night we have the local coastal plan sea level rise update.
Did you mention that was at 6 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock?
It's 6 p.m., yes, correct. And Thursday night at 6 to 9 p.m. at the community center is the local coastal plan update, sea level rise, community work group, as well as public meeting focused on an introduction to adaptation strategies. So this week there will be a mailer that will be arriving at all residents and property owners that own property in Pacifica and residents in Pacifica, announcing that meeting, as well as the other public meetings that will be forthcoming. So we encourage anyone and everyone to make it out to that meeting and learn about adaptation strategies. And finally, I will mention that regarding the Get Us Moving presentation that was offered, we will be pushing out heavily through all of our social media the survey availability for Pacifica residents to take that survey. We did that for the previous survey, and there was a high survey respondent number from Pacifica, and we want to repeat that and encourage all residents of Pacifica to take that survey. And so we'll be pushing that out. Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Kevin.
John?
Yes.
I just want to see if Kevin could arrange that, being there is no parking lot for the community center and back, that maybe we don't charge for parking on Thursday night. I know they've done that for the Elf Fair, in the Caltrans lot that we have next door. I know they've done that before.
Yeah, I think I'm getting the signal from Public Works Director Ocampo that will be the case, that there won't be charging for parking for the 6 o'clock meeting, correct?
Thank you, Van.
All right, very good. Okay. Finally, we have one item for consideration. It is potential legal options available to address increased air traffic noise. And could we have the staff report, please?
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. So I thought that before I delve into the staff report, that I just make clear that this report is about just one of the available options to the city in terms of dealing with and addressing aircraft noise impacts and issues. We have the roundtable, we have stakeholder meetings, we have community engagement, we have technical assistance that we get from the roundtable. In addition, and what the council asked me to look into is another option, which is legal options. So I just want to make clear that this is just one of the many tools that the city has to address the aircraft noise impacts facing the city. So the council asked me to look into what other cities may be doing with regard to this issue, and also to address in a limited nature the legal options available to the city if it chose to file a legal action or some other suit against the FAA or SFO. I did do that. That is, summarized in the report that you have before you. In brief, our ability to challenge the 2014 NorCal Next Gen order has passed. While there's a possibility to get an exception to the statute of limitations to challenge that, it's on very limited grounds. There'd have to be reasonable grounds. I don't believe those grounds exist in our case. That order was issued in 2014. It's now 2018. The City of Phoenix case, which I'm sure you're all aware of and we've heard a lot about, that court in that case actually did allow an exception to the statute of limitations, but in that case it was a very fact-based analysis because the FAA had in fact told the City of Phoenix at the time that the order was issued that they were going to fix problems with it, and then 9 months later the City of Phoenix actually challenged the order, different than what we have before us. In addition, even if we were able to timely file a challenge, the standard for reviewing those next-gen orders is very high. It's an arbitrary and capricious standard. We've already had that challenge heard here with regard to the 2014 order. That challenge was made by Portola Valley and Woodside residents back in 2016, and in fact, that ruling came down that order, our order, was not arbitrary and capricious. That is most likely a very precedent-setting decision, so I don't even think that even if we were to challenge it, we would have much success. With regard to state law claims, I believe Councilmember Martin was particularly interested in that. Unfortunately, the federal courts have held that the authority to regulate aircraft flight paths is in the exclusive jurisdiction of the federal courts. And that means that our ability to file state law claims is very much limited, especially when they're considered to be intertwined with the aircraft flights and paths, which courts have already held nuisance and other tort claims that are available under state law would not be available to challenge FAA next-gen orders like our 2014 order. I was also asked to talk to other city attorneys in the area to see if they had in fact done any of their own research. I was able to contact about 3 city attorneys in total. The city attorneys from Half Moon Bay and Brisbane both told me that they had not been directed by their councils to do any research. They had not. They did tell me that they were interested in any research I uncovered, so that they could just be aware of it. With regard to the city attorney of Palo Alto, I also was able to have some information from her. She was able to tell me that with regard to legal options, that the council had directed her to look into that. She had a closed session with the council. She was not able to tell me what was discussed in that closed session. What she did tell me is that out of that closed session, the city council gave direction to their staff not to pursue litigation strategies, but instead to further pursue their roundtable discussions. And in fact, what they have chosen to do is to consider creating an additional South City roundtable in addition to the San Francisco roundtable that they would participate in, and that they would actually continue with their legislative efforts and continue participation in whatever roundtables they were a party to, but they're not pursuing legal options at this point. I also was able to have a conversation with an attorney who represents Southern California roundtables and has had some success, she has said, with their roundtables in the El Segundo area with regard to the LA airport. And that, what she said is they are in fact using a coordinated strategy that includes getting first all of the technical expertise that they can out of the roundtables. Number one, that technical expertise is at the airport's expense, so it's not expense borne by the cities who are part of the roundtable. They then use a strategy of trying to determine which cities actually benefit from or are harmed by particular paths that the airplanes follow. And then they actually have broken into more smaller groups to actually coalesce with those cities who are more similar in terms of the harms that they're experiencing. Some cities are harmed by arrivals, others by departures. Others prefer flight paths to be higher. Others prefer flight paths to be, directed in a totally different area. So they have found cities that are more similar in nature with regard to concerns and issues, and then with the expertise of not only their technical experts, but also with their legislators, state and federal, and then their local elected officials, along with their community engagement. My understanding is that they have actually found some success and some movement on the part of the FAA with that very long-term, consolidated, coordinated effort that's technical, political, and legislative. So with that, with regard to the one issue in terms of legal options, as the report says, that one tool right now, based on the facts that we have today, I'm not recommending that the city pursue legal options. Not to say that that may not change in the future, because facts change. There may be another order coming down. At that point, we can revisit it again. But currently, at this point, I wouldn't recommend that the city pursue legal options at this time. And I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that report. I have a question. If we do see new orders come down, how long would we have to respond with a potential lawsuit in that case?
Usually, technically, once the order is officially filed and issued, you have 60 days. But what generally happens is the FAA will release the order usually a month in advance before it's filed, that supposedly gives cities and the communities an opportunity to review and voice their concerns. But after it's officially filed, there's 60 days. My understanding is that, some new orders may be in the works. I'm not certain that, new orders are here for Northern California, but there are other orders that are in the works. I don't know, I don't have any date on when that will be out, but that is certainly something to keep a watch on.
Sue Vatalas.
When I just went to the airport, they're building a new terminal that connects Terminal 1 to the international terminal. And apparently, I heard this from someone else, that the EIR says there will be no additional flight patterns from there. I can't believe that. I mean, I'm pretty sure that if you build a new terminal, you're going to have additional flights. And I think that that may be our opportunity when that's done to actually do something about this, because I assume, and that's not a great word, but I assume there will be a lot more flights coming out of there.
Yeah, my understanding is that growth by the airports is a very big issue in terms of aircraft noise, and that what I have heard in some successful roundtables, as I was saying, is that the stakeholder meetings meaning meetings not just with, local elected officials and your state and federal legislatures, but also with, key people from the FAA, from the airport. They have been actively engaged in doing that in Southern California. I believe that, my understanding is that Palo Alto, they are directing their staff to get engaged in those stakeholder meetings as well. And that's when those growth issues certainly will come to the forefront, and it would be a perfect opportunity to have those types of discussions.
Thank you.
Sue DeGree.
Right, at the roundtable here in South San Francisco, we have asked about caps regarding the amount of, because it's almost daily and weekly that either existing airlines add flight pass and that there's new ones coming in constantly. I did have a chat with somebody about corporations today, and the point of view from that person regarding corporations' involvement is that corporations are the ones that buy the bulk, and so airlines themselves would have a problem that the corporations and their large buying power could say, well, airline, if you don't provide, or airport, if you don't provide convenient for our corporations, we will go elsewhere. So that was that perspective. And on that one, you may have also the airport weighing in on that, as well as the county of San Francisco. We're a little bit not quite worked that one out yet. The other thing, before I forget, looking at things the city can do, is that the airport director has, and the city hopefully will be getting involved in this quick as possible. In July, they're announcing new insulation opportunities. We can't get too excited about that because these new insulation opportunities are going to be pretty much in the past where they were. But if you weren't insulated at that time, your house wasn't, that you're probably eligible. And if your insulation has worn out, you're eligible. So for those few people way back in the original area, the northern part of Pacifica that were, but that is another thing that we could maybe lobby about. Since Next Gen concentrates flight plans, flight paths, maybe concurrently with noise considerations, we might be considering insulation of homes. And I think that money comes from the profits of the airports, if I've got that straight. Then I did talk to Corey Wolbach from Palo Alto, and yes, they also feel that having a round table, which is, so you said South Cities, but it's not South City. I know what you mean. You mean the city south
southern,
of, yeah,
right.
the Southern.
Sorry.
And I think you had mentioned to me that the Englewood or Secundo group, that their round table, which was very large, split up into smaller local round tables.
Yes.
And our round table is now discussing whether or not we should incorporate Palo Alto, et cetera, the cities in the southern, South County of us, into our round table, which is already at least 20 cities. So my personal perspective is I tend to agree with what's happening in Los Angeles area, that strong local roundtables collaborating together throughout the state and the nation will give more power to our voice. Whether or not the roundtable here will go that way. I don't know, but one of the things at the last meeting, which was April 4th, which the roundtable said is, we don't know which way Palo Alto and those cities are going to go. And so you and I just heard this last week that Palo Alto is talking about creating with Santa Cruz a roundtable for that section. So that decision, if that's their decision, then our discussion about whether or not to incorporate them would be gone. There wouldn't be any controversy, but yes, so the technical groups are good technical groups, and I can understand that. I think that's very important, because in the technical groups, the local FAA folks, like her name is Tam, I can never get it right, she's always been very willing to move things technically as much as she can, but the roundtable now feels, as of the last 30 days, she has been pretty much silenced. So this is a very, very, very difficult situation. But as a city, what can we do? I think we're still open to what other things we can do. I know the last time we directed the city manager to be able to write the different letters to prospective areas of importance and to make them tougher or more persuasive as fits. So I don't know where council wants to go on that, on all of these things. But you also said we're not closing the door to lawsuits. If it comes appropriate, more appropriate than what you've already discovered, that we would bring this, and all the cities, I would say, are looking at, is there a lawsuit we can go to? Would that be the fastest way to go?
Correct, and I will say that right now, I'm not aware of any cities that are pursuing legal options at this state, but I know that if facts change, that we certainly would want to revisit that potential option.
And two other things that are the unknown popping around. There has been that the FAA was to reorganize, which, like, okay, that would give us an opportunity legislatively to push for making the mandate to the FAA noise as a higher priority than efficiency. But then that reorganization thing has been pushed out, and right now it sounds like they're not talking about reorganization, which might be a good thing from the other point of view, is that they were also talking about making the FAA not a government thing, but a private, which most cities are more concerned about if you make it private rather than government. So that's, and then the other thing that Sue was talking about, there is another stage, because I've been snooping around on the website, there is another stage in the long next-gen plan, but I think it doesn't come up till close to 2030, which is a long time to wait for pain from noise.
Thank you, Sue. Mike O'Neill.
I wanted to ask and see, is looking at, when I was doing some research on there, the airport had, in 1992, they did like a master plan, and then they revised it about 5 years later. And one of the things they did was CEQA, and in the CEQA, it said that they did not have, it would not increase customer traffic or have a change in flight plans. Is that something, and is that something that we could look at as a violation of their CEQA plans?
Well, there's also a strict statute of limitations for making CEQA challenges. So I would say if it's a CEQA action that took place back in 1992 or even 1997.
The nearest I couldn't find an actual CEQA, okay? They found a lot of references to it.
Probably NEPA.
Well, there was NEPA was mentioned also. Okay, that's the National Environmental Policy Act.
Right.
And it was still in process as of the date I saw. But it seemed like there was a whole lot of different websites and you couldn't find a complete document for anything. Because I wanted to see when the negative declaration was compared, and I believe the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco did a negative declaration in 2015, if I remember correctly. And that was for a CEQA. But the basis that they said the negative declaration was on was information that did not transpire. I mean, there has been an increase in traffic. There has been a change in flight patterns. There is increased traffic on the highways, because it also covered transportation for people to get there to the airport, and even the noise construction of the new control tower. So is that anything, as of, that CEQA's California law, not federal law, but is there anything there that we could possibly hang out?
Well, as I said, in terms of a CEQA challenge, the time to challenge has passed. So that would not be an avenue. And so I'm not sure what other challenges. I think I hear you saying that they didn't do, the project is different than what was described in the CEQA document. Is that what you're saying? Or?
No, the project is pretty much the same.
Okay.
It's the findings of the CEQA seem to be different than what has transpired.
So the challenge to that would be a CEQA challenge, because we're saying that the CEQA findings were inadequate, but the challenge at that point is 30 days. So we've missed that.
Is there
That's a limitation.
some way we could get on the list? I mean, let's face it, the airport's almost an annuity for contractors. I mean, they're always building something out there. Is it possible to get on some sort of list or whatever of when a CEQA was filed?
Well,
at the airport for projects?
That's an interesting question, and I do not know if they have a list. Unfortunately, the Public Records Act does not require them to provide us with future documents. So we wouldn't be able to get it that way. But, most large entities like SFO would in fact have much like we do, if you're interested in this topic, put your name on a list and we will, alert you when these issues arise. I would imagine that's something that staff could look into and determine whether or not there is a list, and if there is a list, we should put our names on it.
Well, I did look at the agendas for the Airport Commission, and I mean, we are far, far more transparent than they are. I was shocked at the lack of in their thing. I did check with the State Clearinghouse for CEQA up in Sacramento, and I just couldn't. I don't know how that's searched or indexed, but there was like, SFO doesn't exist in Sacramento. I know that, but you know what I mean in regards to CEQA. So CEQA is or NEPA now, the National Environmental Policy Act. I'm not familiar with that at all. Is that?
It's just the federal version of CEQA.
Oh, is that all? Okay.
So that's what it is.
Okay, so it would go through the same basis of noise, traffic.
Yes, there are different standards, but essentially it is the environmental document for federal projects.
Oh, okay, I've never heard of it before. Okay, so that is something that we should possibly do a light review and see if it's something we could hang a hat on, is a CEQA violation?
Well, not yet. They'd have to actually create a document for us to review. But I definitely think the idea of seeing if there is a list, getting our name on that list so that we would be notified, is certainly a viable option.
And then we would just have to act within 30 days or whatever.
Correct.
Okay.
But they would have noticing requirements, so we would know way before the filing if we get put on the list.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Mike. Sue DeGree.
So I don't know that much about the Airport Land Use Committee, because the SFO Roundtable Committee doesn't deal with, but maybe that is a body within our county and San Mateo County that would know about the types of questions we're asking here? I would
think so, and I would think that the roundtable would have that information or would be
we haven't
aware
had
of that, or your technical experts would be aware of that as well.
Maybe now they will start, but I know in the past we haven't, because we've brought up the fact that we've discovered that, there are more air flights almost every week.
My understanding is that is where your technical advisors play such a big role. They highlight, whether or not there's a CEQA document coming out, what kind of land use designations or rezonings or, new
Right now, they've
entitlements
just
are-
been dealing with flight paths.
Right. But they can also provide that kind of assistance as well. At least that's my
At least that
understanding.
office should be, yeah.
What body did you just refer to, Sue?
It's called the Airport Land Use Committee.
Oh, okay.
It's a county committee.
I believe that is part of CCAG.
Oh, maybe. Maybe it is, yes.
Okay, I've never heard of it. I just,
And I bet they don't meet too often, and that might be part of the
Yeah,
problem, if they only meet like once a year or something like that.
I think they met, a month or two ago. Over,
I think you're right, it's part of
Yeah.
CK.
kind of like the fire district one we're in.
yeah. Any other questions from council? Okay.
I do have one crazy question, but when they keep saying arbitrary and capricious, I mean, some of the things we're talking about feel, maybe I don't know the definition of capricious, but it sounds like sneaky. And I'm thinking some of this feels rather sneaky.
Well, I will say in the City of Phoenix case, they felt that the FAA in that instance did behave arbitrarily and capriciously. And the reason was because they essentially promised to make changes, but then really did not make any changes and really was just waiting until the statute of limitations ran.
So it sounds like the city of Phoenix realized there were issues and
Yes,
said
yes.
something, and the
City
FAA promised something and didn't follow through.
That was one basis. Another basis was that the FAA misrepresented the impacts of the order in terms of, they said that it would, barely impact.
Well, that's the one that they told us as well.
Right. So if there are I would say if there are misrepresentations, knowing misrepresentations that the FAA is making to cities to try to lull them into, acceptance or acquiescence, now we're talking about something that could possibly be arbitrary and capricious. Our problem here is we need to wait for another order in order for them to behave arbitrarily and capriciously, because our time to challenge the last one has passed.
So if they come out with another order, okay, within the next couple of years or whatever, will they have to come out with a CEQA or a NEPA report?
Yes.
Okay.
My understanding is yes, they would.
So then we could actually go after them for two things. One, potential violation or inaccuracies in their CEQA or NEPA, and also for the change of flight
Arbitrary and
patterns.
capricious, right.
Right, and then we could then reach out to other cities and see if they would join the lawsuit
Yes.
to take and do that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as I said, the legal option today, I don't think is there. That's not to say that it won't be there, in tenfold, if they come out with an order that is arbitrary and capricious, or, they violate CEQA or NEPA in the act of adopting the order. The one thing that I will say about CEQA and NEPA, understand, is that it can't block the project. If you are successful, the remedy that you would get is the court would say, go back and do it again.
Do the CEQA again?
Do the CEQA again. So people need to understand that CEQA doesn't actually stop a project. It delays it, but it doesn't stop it. If
But then,
an arbitrary and capricious order were to come down, the FAA would have to come back and redo the order.
okay, but if you took and you had a new order come down and you filed the CEQA and the NEPA, That, and they have to go back and do a new CEQA or NEPA. Then you would that would delay the implementation of it while the other suit follows for implementing that. Could it actually affect and cause a rollback of next gen first order?
No.
No, so this is pretty much set in stone.
Yes.
Unless we get a legislative or
Yes.
regulatory change.
Yes, everything we're talking about is prospective.
Okay, but another order allows us to file the CEQA NEPA to delay the implementation and then possibly get the second order rolled back from what that is. Okay, now I understand.
All right. Okay. I have 2 speaker cards. Ken Miles, followed by Kathleen Courtney.
Good evening. Getting to be an interesting conversation here. I got a lot to say. I don't know if I have full time to talk about this, but I, as a kid, grew up in San Francisco, and back in those days, never had this problem we're having right now in Pacifica. Planes are quieter and far fewer planes. Then during my career with the government, flew all over the world and all over the country, and primarily, when I took off from SFO, we flew out over the ocean, if we're going west or north, and flew over the bay and east if we're going towards the east. And rarely did the plane ever go over Pacifica. And that's not what's happening today. Getting back to what the attorney was saying about what FAA has said when they filed their next gen, they stated, I'm getting this from the Santa Cruz people, there's no impacts on the communities at all. And definitely there has been. There's been a lot of noise coming up. There's planes are seemingly following any routes, or pretty much a general route anywhere in Pacifica. And a lot of communities have, besides the ones that the attorney mentioned, have filed complaints, letters to the city, city letters and lawsuits to FAA, and they're marching along at different speeds. But maybe the more cities that do file a civil lawsuit, like Pacifica, and could be led with joined by other communities in northern San Mateo, as well as far down to Santa Cruz that are going into SFO. Maybe then we'd have a collective body, as Phoenix did with all their neighboring communities, and have a lot more power when it comes to dealing with the FAA. As I understand now, you're waiting for the FAA to come in and talk to you, but you're waiting a long time. What World Health Organization, including the Center for Disease Control, is saying that noise can impact people's sleep. Like 40% of people living close to airports can't get sleep, and that's going to have an impact on their jobs and their education, as well as has cardiovascular problems. And that's very important. We're being bombarded by noise pollution, and we got to do something about that. Yes, we did wait too long to file a lawsuit, but I think, and many other people think, what do we really have to lose if we go ahead and file a civil lawsuit? And maybe justice delayed is justice denied. So if we don't do anything, we're just going to have this continuing on as SFO increases its airport traffic, as the populations around here grow and businesses expand, we're going to have problems. I haven't finished, but I guess I'll send a letter to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Kathleen Courtney.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Courtney. I live in the back of the valley, and I moved here about 6 years ago to this little bit of heaven on earth, and that's all changed. I bought a house here because I thought I would retire here. I just realized tonight that that's not going to be possible. At 5:45 in the morning, I hear it at 11:45 at night. I hear it. I'm in the back of the valley, so maybe there's just a lot more echoing back there, but it's constant. I'm on stopjetnoise.net, I think, which I feel like is an elevator button that I just keep pushing to make it go away, making my reports like a good citizen, and noticing that they're coming within 2 minutes, not more than 2 minutes, often less than every 2 minutes. We have airplanes going over. I was in Manor yesterday, and it was right over my head. It was like, well, I'm glad I don't live in Manor. I mean, I don't know what to say. I do know that that it caused me so much stress right now, clearly. I don't know what to do. When I retire, I was planning on being home and enjoying this beautiful town. But all I do is feel stressful whenever I'm outside in the garden. Why aren't I near my phone so I can hit that stop jet noise button? It's so upsetting, fundamentally. I feel like my home has been taken away. I know this sounds very dramatic, but I'm very sensitive to noise. I can't be the only person, and I don't know what to do now that I hear that it can't go backwards. If it can't go backwards, then, and it won't do anything but stay the same or get worse, then my future is set. I'd love to see a lawsuit. They're not going to respond to anything but money. They will never respond to anything but money. If it hits them in the pocket, which is why these flights have headed are right over our head now, it saves them money until it hits them back in the pocket. It won't change. But I thank you so much for trying, and I'll be here for anything that you need. I'll do anything. I'll do anything to stay in this town. Thank you for this time, and thank you all for all your efforts and for listening, and thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. And that's all the speaker cards I have. And so I'll close the public comment, and Sue Degree.
So once before, we sort of talked a little bit about, so the question I'm asking, and maybe you can't answer it tonight, but if there were members of our community that were willing to present their health issues records, would there be a liability problem on the part of the city? Would they need to do that on their own, or is there any way to coordinate that type of thing?
My understanding is, and I think Mr. Miles mentioned it, and he's quite accurate, there's a lot of studies that show that airport noise does affect health, cardiovascular for sure. So there are a lot of studies out there that reflect that already.
And I have to say that the roundtable did have a presentation on it, and we do have that as part of our repertoire, shall we say. But I was just focusing in on the city of Pacifica.
My point, I'm sorry, I don't think it would create more liability for the city if those stories came out. But my understanding is that there's a lot of studies that have been done that
Right.
reflect
There have been,
those
and there
impacts.
is always a request for more studies, which gets frustrating because the fact of the matter is we have people like the ones that came here that are suffering today, and really to wait another 30 days is like you're almost allowing them to be killed in front of you. So that's why I was just wondering if there was anything the city could do with people who would be willing to present their records that we then could present to congressional people or the FAA itself.
And I think the answer to that is part of whatever coordinated strategy you would work up with your roundtable.
Okay, but you don't see any legal issue, okay?
No.
Okay, good.
Mike O'Neill.
Just a question in terms of, just for reference for the public, what do you think would be the minimal cost if the city was to decide to do a lawsuit tonight? I know it would be kind of like Don Quixote-ish, but 50...
You know, And people have mentioned it, the problem with the FAA is that they are a very huge, large organization with really no shortfall of money to fight these lawsuits. So in order to have an effective lawsuit, which would cost, anywhere from, $75,000 to, $500,000. It's hard. It depends on how much fighting the FAA would do with a lawsuit. My understanding is that they do fight tooth and nail when they are faced with a lawsuit. So, it's hard to answer that question, although I do believe that my understanding is that the most effective means to address the day-to-day noise concerns that are facing communities up and down the state is through these coordinated political, technical, legislative efforts.
Okay, thank you.
So I would add one more thing. Jackie Spears, her aide on this, Kathleen Wentworth, is a former pilot, as probably most of you know. And she is a formidable technical expert on this subject. And so, continuing to keep her in the loop and to keep Jackie in the loop is certainly got to be part of our strategy. And, I'm sure that we will do that. Do we have any other comments?
Deirdre hasn't said anything. She's got a comment.
Well, I don't think there's anything I can add to the conversation. You've all been working on this longer than I have, and I think we just kind of sounds like we have to stay the course. We've done what we can in terms of writing letters. We are on the roundtable. We have some technical experts. Do we need to get an assignment from, is it SFO for a technical expert? Sounded like you were talking about for El Segundo. What was it assigned from the airport?
It comes through the roundtables.
Okay. So we would get a technical expert assigned, or maybe we already have.
Experts, and there's technical groups, and they do meet on regular basis, and they have made some progress, like I said.
So
that's still a strong way to go, and so are the small. What I'm hearing is correctly, there are going to be more roundtables, local, and then within the roundtables, and here the city may decide whether or not they want to lead, is that like Brisbane and Pacifica have already, I work with a group of citizens in Brisbane, and our citizens work very closely together. And so those would be two cities that may want to do something together to collaborate with, either within or without the roundtable.
And just anecdotally, just so you know, it's Brisbane and Pacifica that have the most complaints out of the San Mateo communities related to airport noise. So it sounds like there's a lot of similarities.
I would say there's mutual respect. Ken is one of the ones that goes, there's mutual respect among us, that we're pretty fierce about what affects us, but we're also attentive to how we wouldn't overstep each other.
So does the fact that Palo Alto did they remove themselves from that roundtable and they're going to start a new South Bay?
Oh, Palo Alto was never part of it.
Right. They have chosen to actually perhaps they're exploring it. That what my understanding is, the direction that staff received is to explore being a part of the San Francisco Roundtable, as well as forming their own roundtable of more southern cities that are currently cities that are more southern than the cities that are currently members of the San Francisco Roundtable.
Excuse me, I was interrupted by that plane.
Yes, that's very appropriate.
So one of the things that has been talked about was just kind of cities coming together and forming a closer, objective with similar cities that have the same issues. And I think staying close with Brisbane, for instance, is important. But really, from my perspective, we're doing what we can do. Other than litigation. There's nothing that we can do non-litigation-wise more that is sort of has a legal implication, like another official letter. I know that sounds absolutely silly because I've seen a zillion things saying, let's write more letters as a joke. But it's not like you can't file an official complaint with it being not litigious, but is that?
Well, I think what you're talking about is having another aspect of whatever that coordinated effort is. And with your technical group, your roundtable cities, when you coalesce with the cities that are more similar to Pacifica, certainly, Brisbane may be one of them, that then you decide, based on your technical experts' advice, here are the issues that are facing, just for lack of just as an example, Brisbane and Pacifica. Your arrivals seem to be, the most, harmful issues. What Pacifica and Brisbane should focus on is getting different flight paths, right? Flight paths that avoid both Brisbane and Pacifica. And I'm not a technical expert, so I don't know. Once you figure that out, then the expert is then able to come up with solutions. And this is what was done in Southern California, that all the stakeholders get together, legislators, state, federal, local, FAA, and they do attend, FAA, SFO, their, regional heads, they will attend these meetings, at least they have in Southern California, and then you talk about these solutions, and it may not be a complete solution, but they are finding that when they focus on a solution and they sit down with stakeholders and they have these meetings, they are seeing progress.
Okay. I think that's a good idea. And so documenting that solution and getting it on paper to someone is an important part of this.
And
one other
that's
thing.
been done.
That's been done too.
That's been done,
Probably a lot, right?
voluminously.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to focus on that. But one other thing that we didn't really talk about was the fact that Half Moon Bay and Daly City, their city attorneys have not been instructed by council to.
Well,
is that right?
Brisbane's city attorney has not been instructed.
So that's curious to me. And if
They're not just legal options.
Right, I understand
Right?
that. So, but what's curious to me is that there should be some discussion around that at council. I'm sure it's at council, but if the FAA gets wind that all these cities are instructing to look into this, that could just be a little bit more important to them. And that's all I say.
Mike?
Well, I'd like to throw out for discussion is that separate from the roundtable, we have a subcommittee contact the Brisbane City Council and form a subcommittee and start this process. We've been yakking about this for 2 years. And totally separate from the roundtable, and with all due respect, Sue would not even be a part of it, so she just keeps doing the roundtable. And then, because you have the whole roundtable and you should be pushing that in that forum as a subcommittee. And I'm just thinking we get 2 people from this council and hopefully 2 from Brisbane, and we actually start tackling the problem and the rubber hit the road. And just get it.
You're splitting your strength that way. Why wouldn't you
But
want?
in all fairness, the roundtable's been totally ineffective. They haven't got any of the cities be able to, and I'm not saying it's your fault, Sue. What I'm saying is the roundtable says, well, we've already tried this. The roundtable, hasn't done squat. you know, and it just is maybe two fresh eyes, two fresh four eyes, fresh perspectives, looking at this data would get this moving quicker. And, you know, I would like to see if we move out and we have, you know, if Brisbane would be interested in being a part of it. So I'm throwing that out for consensus.
Through the chair.
Yes. Sue?
I have to object to that because you just heard that in LA, they took the large round table and created smaller ones because that would provide strength. And you have Palo Alto and the southern cities considering creating a round table for their area. So I think to trash the round table, as it were, would be counterproductive for one thing, and to not have round table members on a smaller committee seems very, the right hand is not knowing what the left hand is doing.
And you can pursue that avenue at the round table. This would be a totally separate avenue trying to push this through. So you could push it at the round table, get the cities there that would want to move forward, and we would be working with Brisbane to try to get it moving forward here.
I don't see how that makes sense.
Well, I don't see what the round table has done for Pacifica.
But you haven't been there and part of the whole, I mean, I'll let you speak, John. You've been, I asked you over a year ago, and you've been very faithful, so.
Yeah, so the roundtable has not been totally ineffective. They have submitted to the FAA a letter which is, you know, more than a letter. It references.
How long ago did they send the letter?
Oh, probably a year or so.
Thank
you. But what it references is all of the takeoffs and arrivals that they would like changed. And the FAA has responded, a preliminary response, and most of it has been, well, either no or we'll think about it, frankly. A few, yes, we're going to work on it. But they, you know, the roundtable does have detailed efforts going on all the flight paths that are objectionable.
Which would all be public record and available to a subcommittee.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure, it'd be available to you. I mean, you know, I'll send it over to you, man. I mean,
But no, but you send them a letter a year ago, they come back, you know, not really solving the problem. I mean, I still hear the airplanes over me. So I just think let's try.
It's very fair, not really solving the problem.
Right. So what I'm saying is, if we have a lead on Southern California having some success, then why can't we have a subcommittee here approach Brisbane and see if they are interested in joining forces and the two of us move forward? Okay, and we, we get the data from the roundtable, and we continue with the roundtable too. I'm not saying we abandon that. And Sue, as the rep there, takes and continues trying to, break it down to smaller groups there. So we have a two-pronged attack.
We're not totally disagreeing, except that you have a Brown Act. So if you're going to take 2 new people for a subcommittee and then have another council person on the round table, that's 3 people, so you can't talk to each other. So I don't see why your idea within, like I already mentioned, we have Pacificans and Brisbane people already talking. I think we'd probably want to add.
So could we just have, could Sue, you be one of the subcommittee members? And then just have one other council and?
Well, it would be helpful always to have 2, that's true.
Right.
Yeah, you want two because.
Sue and someone else, so
Right.
at least you have the history.
And then we could meet with individuals, with any council person of the, and I would hope it would be the roundtable person from the city, the other city, Brisbane.
Yeah.
Half Moon Bay.
Who is the roundtable person from Brisbane?
What's her name?
Oh, the new lady?
Yes, I forget her name at the moment.
Karen Cunningham, yeah. Okay.
Oh, no. No, it isn't that one. We were going to actually meet.
The one that's real young with purple hair?
I don't remember her name at the moment, but I might before the end of the meeting. And we were going to meet, the three of us, with Daly City, but because of the reorg of city councils, I haven't heard anything from Daly City. It's kind of like quiet, but.
Yeah.
But I don't think you want to weaken what already is there. Strengthen it, yes. Weaken it, no.
So we're agreeing on that?
So if you're going to appoint a new ad hoc committee, which is what I'm hearing, that's not on the agenda tonight. So we would need to bring that issue back to the council.
I think that is a good thing for, that's what I was saying earlier, that the city may want to lead in some way, but I certainly would not want to trash any roundtables when the roundtables are moving forward.
And just to get clarity, this ad hoc committee would not be associated with the roundtable. It would be an ad hoc committee created to work with a Brisbane subcommittee to talk about airport noise issues.
And I'm assuming they would then go to their cities and then make a voice to the roundtable and to the technical group.
I also think it would need to be Brisbane and any other cities that would have the same issue in terms of departures. Is what our main issue is, departures, if I'm correct.
Correct. Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
So you would
Daly
wa- you- so
City,
you
Half
would-
Moon Bay.
So I would say that what you'd want to do is you'd want your roundtable representative to get that technical information from the technical
Yes.
experts as to figuring out what are the cities that are similarly situated.
Correct.
I think we know who they are, but they would need to say whether they wanted to participate or not.
Correct.
Mid-coast would be another one.
So, well, I'll let the city manager.
Yeah, the only other point that I was going to bring up regarding the concept of an ad hoc committee is that, as everyone knows, these airport flight issues are highly technical. The roundtable has technical expertise, consultants that are supported by the money that all the partnering agencies pay into the roundtable to help support that. I would think that part of the consideration of an ad hoc committee would be the need for funding for technical support and/or increased staff support for that ad hoc committee. So that would need to be vetted in the consideration if the council were to consider that in the future.
That can be discussed next meeting. So I would like to ask that item to be put on the next agenda. Is that okay with everybody?
You have time to put that together?
Yep.
Yes. Kevin, you have time to put that
Is there,
together?
is there any reason it can't be?
Well, I think we can put that together. Yeah. It will, be more the concept. I don't know how we would estimate what the technical support dollars would be, but, those elements would be in there.
And if
for
it's
the council to
connected, like I said, through not being totally separate, I mean, still being on the San Francisco Roundtable, I just can get it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that it's important to remember that you want to get your technical expertise through roundtables.
Yes.
So that, that expense is not borne by the city or cities.
Correct.
It's borne right, by the airport. So
I don't think this roundtable would have a problem with that. They don't have a problem now, as far as I can tell.
You get copies, don't you?
Yeah, you can get what you can ask. You can just
So,
ask.
so Sue, would you have time to figure out how this funding would work from the roundtable?
Oh, yeah, just ask.
Okay.
Would you be able to get that done by next meeting?
And they would be the ones to tell me if they couldn't, not me.
Next meeting in
2 weeks.
Not tomorrow night.
No, not tomorrow night, no. No, so in 2 weeks,
I
can you
could
get
let
that
you know in like
information?
3 or 4 days.
Okay.
And then whether or not it's on the next agenda will be dependent upon whether or not we get that.
I'd want an explanation. If they say we can't get the information, I would want an explanation as to why we can't get a public document.
Yeah, and I don't see any reason, I don't know. But the other thing, remember that the roundtable is also now part of NOISE, which means that you have lobbying power through their roundtable across the nation now with the National League of Cities and other
And that
agencies.
was over a year in getting it done, right?
Mike, you are really down on it. Try to work it out so it works out to our benefit. I don't see how one small subgroup is going to go any faster on things, but, so we'll have that argument, I guess.
I guess, do we need to give you direction in regards to litigation?
No, it was just to receive.
That's the item on the agenda. I was just,
Yeah, the recommended action was just to receive the report,
okay.
so we don't need action.
Well, thank you for doing the outreach.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, we are adjourned.
Let's do it. No, not due till May 2nd.
Oh, I thought it was just in case it came early.
No, I wanted to, my son is on.
Right, no, that's what you, oh, okay, good.